Well, quite a lot. I mean, people weren't expecting a huge amount and they were pleasantly surprised. Let's run through the list. Remember, the Sustainable Development Goals, these new targets for lifting people out of poverty and also improving people's lives, running to 2015. Very ambitious. And Xi Jinping pledged immediately $2 billion and up to $12 billion from China over the life of the goals, over 15 years, also sponsoring hundreds of projects. And then it moved on to the special session on women. Lots of projects announced that China is there, and a renewed commitment for equality of women and girls across the world led by China. Then, of course, his speech, very interesting. They were calling this a Super Monday because there's so many speeches going on from heads of state, but it was almost multipolar Monday with different views of the world. And China's view of where the world should go and its place in it was probably the most explained it ever has been here at the United Nations. And it got a lot of applause lines, especially from developing countries, when President Xi was saying things like, small countries should be on an equal footing with big countries, that they shouldn't be the law of the jungle anymore when it comes to international affairs, that we are moving to a multipolar world and that is inevitable. So all that was taken extremely well as the things that we've just been talking about in terms of pledges for UN peacekeeping, which, as you know, is in deep trouble. Of the 30,000 extra peacekeeping troops that were pledged by the 193 nations here behind me, about a third of them are going to be coming from China.
Well, Nathan, this is President Xi Jinping's first state visit to the United States and UN as well. He had a very full schedule from Seattle, meeting with business leaders, and then over to Washington and now in New York. How does the Americans view his visit?
They were amused and surprised because, they're used to a different style of Chinese leadership. And especially in Seattle, Chinese President Xi Jinping was able to relax a bit. The speech in front of all the tech entrepreneurs, quoted Netflix series The House of Cards, which of course has a big following in China as well as here in the US. He joked about Ernest Hemingway and drinking his favorite cocktail in Havana, dropped a few names of American authors that he liked. So it was really a sort of a introduction tour to not just the American business elite, but also the American people as a whole. And that really set the tone for the visit. Of course, there was lots of business deals done as well, which doesn't hurt. But then in Washington, we don't often hear the Chinese narrative in Washington, especially at the White House. But during their joint press conference, Xi Jinping and US President Barack Obama, President Xi was not reticent about spelling out China's priorities and also China's national interests, especially when it comes to territorial claims in the South China Sea, for example, a denial of cyber hacking, and they actually came together and were able to actually work out some beginnings of code of conduct on these contentious issues as well as moving forward on the issue that unites the US and China, which is climate change. And then it was here to the United Nations, a very busy schedule indeed, but every trip basically hit all the marks and exceeded it in many respects. I think what it has done is it's shown the Chinese leadership to the American people, but also here the world. And it was also a reassurance trip. Remember, we've seen the stock market fall in China, we've seen a slowdown in the economy, but there was an air of confidence, whether it's buying 300 planes from Boeing or pledging $3 billion for sustainable development.